Well, good evening. It's good to see you all here this evening. Again, we appreciate you coming out and supporting this meeting, and I hope that I can bring you a few more thoughts that will be helpful for you in some way. You're an encouragement to us, and just want to say how much we've enjoyed being here so far. Brother Ralph, he took us out today and tried to kill us with enough food for our horse, and it was so much I actually didn't eat this evening. With the girls, they wanted to eat at Taco Bell, and I drank a Coke. It was great food, and we enjoyed it, but enjoyed mostly the fellowship, going out, spending time with brothers and sisters in Christ, and going over to see Jacob. We enjoyed that as well. There's so many things here, and we appreciate you so much, and we really have had a good time so far. This evening, I want to talk about something besides politics. I want to talk about baseball. And got a few slides we want to go over to talk about in baseball. And the first one is the 1919 White Sox. They were called the Black Sox. I don't know if there's anyone in here that was around in 1919, except maybe Ralph, you might remember these guys. But, however, what they did was they threw the World Series. The Chicago White Sox threw the World Series. They weren't being paid very well. Charles Kaminsky was their owner. He was known not to pay them very well. They made $3,000 a year on their average salary. Works out to $37,500 in today's money. But he always paid them less than most other clubs. They had already won the World Series in 1917. And because of that, these men, we see that Shoeless Joe Jackson, you might have heard that name, Buck Weaver, these men, all of the ones that they're shown there, through the World Series. They started getting with the mob, or those people that were betting on the games, and agreed to take about, I think it was $5,000 apiece to throw the World Series. But Buck Weaver, however, he never took any money, but when they got caught, they were all banned from baseball. And he swore up and down that he never took any money. Some of the things that I want to point out is these guys probably had a good reason throw the World Series. They weren't being paid very well. They had thoughts in their mind, I'm sure, that they were justified by the circumstances. Buck Weaver probably said, well, I didn't have anything to do with this. This is somebody else's problem, somebody else's fault. But however, they broke the rules and they paid the price for it. We think about Pete Rose. We want to look at the things that Pete Rose did in his time in baseball. He was the all-time leader, still is, in hits, 4,256 games played, at-bats, singles, outs, won 3 World Series rings, batting titles, 3 of those. He did a lot of things in his baseball career. And he started managing for the Cincinnati Reds, but he liked to gamble. And he was a great player, and he probably felt like he was above most people. A lot of people thought a lot of him. And he was gambling on his own team, but he got caught. And now that he got caught, he's ineligible for being in the Hall of Fame. He'll never be in it unless they finally decide to vote him in. But he's banned from baseball. I thought about that, and I thought about what Pete Rose might have been thinking was, what is he going to do? He enjoyed gambling. Probably thought nobody would ever know that he did those kind of things. But however, he broke the rules, and he's out of baseball from now on. Think about Barry Bonds. That's not been that long ago, in the early 90s. But do you remember how big Barry Bonds got? These are the pictures I could find of him when he started and then at the end of his career. But Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire was another one who did the same thing. It was about the steroids. They just grew, bulked up all of a sudden. Boy, they could hit some home runs, couldn't they? But when they found out that they had done all these things, in which we see all the records he held so many, single season record of home runs for 73 home runs. And guys, I may have to cut this off. I'll talk real loud. How about that? I don't don't think I can talk as loud as Ralph, but I'll try to talk as loud as I can. But we see all the things that they did. He had held all of these things, slugging percentage, .863, 863, consecutive seasons with a 600 slugging average. He held so many of these records. But you know, the thing about him is we'll always remember him of his steroid use. You know, he was acquitted of all of those charges, but we see how great a player he was. But it tarnished his image. He broke the rules. And then, like we said, so many of them did. You know, and I think what they ought to do in that sense is where they have him in the record books and he's above Babe Ruth, put a little asterisk beside that. Because it's always going to be there. People are always going to think that he was a cheater. He broke the rules. And that's the title of this evening's lesson, Breaking the Rules. You know, Douglas MacArthur coined that phrase, that rules are made to be broken. I've heard that before. People say, well, rules are made to be broken. It's just a half a quote, actually. And this was the rest. And are too often for the lazy to hide behind. But that's the way a lot of people feel about rules. They're just made for us to break. You know, because there's so many different ways to break them. And I thought about that, and we looked at these things. We can break the rules, but we can blame it on all sorts of things. We can say, well, it's someone else's fault, just like the ones with the White Sox, the 1919 White Sox. We can say we're justified by the circumstances that we're in. Well, you know, I had to do it. That no one will know. No one will ever know that I'm doing this. And it's just for personal gain. You know, that's what the White Sox were doing as well. It was all about money, right? And it's easy to break the rules. Pretty easy to do those things. But what about breaking the rules in our Christian life? When we think about that, Romans 6, verses 12 and 13 says, therefore do not let sin reign in your mortal body, that you should obey it in its lust, and do not present yourselves as your members as instruments of unrighteousness to sin, but present yourselves to God as being alive from the dead, and your members as instruments of righteousness to God. That we're not to break the rules, not God's rules, that we're to present ourselves as righteousness. But what about these things? We can look at each one of these things that we talked about this evening and look at them, and we can look at how people try to do that, how they try to break the rules and do those things. How about someone else's fault? Genesis 3, verses 10 and 13, or 10 through 13, Adam and Eve had that feeling, didn't they? They could blame that on someone else. When they were told not to eat of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, they went and broke the rules, didn't they? Let's read here. So he said, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself. And he said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat? Then the man said, the woman who you gave to me, or gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate. And the Lord God said to the woman, what is this you have done? And the woman said, the serpent deceived me, and I ate. You know, it's always somebody else's fault. You know, when we break the rules, we go, man, it was so-and-so's fault. You know, I think about, my son, he used to always blame it on someone else. You know, he'd get in trouble at school, and he'd go, well, Dad, that other guy hit me, or this, and this, you know. And I know I did that too. You know, I blamed it on my brothers and sisters when I got in trouble. You know, we'd always try to find someone to blame it on. Sometimes I was guilty by association when I was with my brothers and sisters. They were older than me, and they got me in a lot of trouble when I was a kid. Got a lot of whippings because of them. But, however, if it was wrong, right? But we see how God looks at these things. First thing that Adam says, well, woman you gave me, he's actually blaming it on God. He said, you gave me this woman, and she gave it to you. And she said, well, she's blaming it on the serpent, blaming it on Satan. But what happened to that? What were the repercussions of that? We can go on and read down in the 16th verse, and it says, "And to the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be on your husband, and he shall rule over you. Then to Adam he said, because you have not heeded the voice of your wife, because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil shall you eat all the days of your life, but thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. And you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return." You know, there was some serious repercussions on that. And I think about it every time I go and get a splinter in my hand, or get a briar in my hand, or I'm walking through the woods. I like to deer hunt, and I go through a big old briar patch, and they're sticking all in my pants and stuff, and I can blame Adam for that. I think about that a lot. Think about women and their having children and the conception of that. That y'all and us, me, are paying for those penalties that they did. See, justifying with God doesn't work. He tells us to do something, we better do it. If he tells us not to, we better not do it. We can't use that excuse. What about justified by circumstance? I thought about this, and I thought about the children of Israel. Here they're going out in the wilderness. They're wandering for 40 years. They're going out there and they're eating manna, and they're getting tired of it. Let's look at this here in Numbers 11, 4 through 6. Now the mixed multitude were among them, and yielded intense craving. So the children of Israel also wept again and said, who will give us meat to eat? We remember the fish which we ate freely in Egypt, the cucumbers and the melons, the leeks and the onions and the garlic. But now our whole being is dried up, and there is nothing at all except this manna before our eyes. You know, that's funny how that is with people. And I often thought about that. I was thinking, what if I told you we were going to eat Dunkin' Donuts every day? What if I said that's what you were going to have? Would you complain? I like Dunkin' Donuts. I really like cream-filled donuts. They're great. But if I had to eat them every day, I'd probably get tired of it. You know, and I might start thinking, well, shoot, there's a lot of other things we could be eating. Why do I have to eat these stinking donuts every day? You know, would you get that feeling? Yeah. Now, I could look at it in the sense of these people, and I can understand their feeling and their complaining. But you know, God didn't put up with that. He didn't much like it. You know, he was giving them that free food. All they had to do was gather it. It's a pretty good deal. You know, just go out and gather the food up. But they complained about it. And because of their complaining, they felt like they were justified. And again, I probably feel the same way. But how did God react to them? Numbers chapter 11, verses 18 to 20 says, then you shall say to the people, concentrate yourself, for tomorrow you shall eat meat. For you have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, who will give us meat to eat? For it is well with us in Egypt. Therefore the Lord will give you meat to eat, and you shall eat. And you shall eat not 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, nor 10 days, nor 20 days, but a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you, because you have despised the Lord who is among you, and have wept before him, saying, why did we ever come up out of Egypt? He was not very happy with that, was he? You know, they were having free food. He was just offering it to them. They started complaining about what he was offering. You know, the thing about it is we can't justify with God. We can't say, well, the circumstances we have to sin are good, and God, that's why we did this. It won't work. God told them to do that. They complained. They said, well, shoot, we just might as well go back and be slaves because we have better food. See, they weren't looking forward to the prize that they were trying to receive. That was that promised land. See, that's what sometimes we miss as Christians. We start having sin come in our life, and then we start justifying it and say, well, God, you really don't know how it is. God, you really don't know how it is. Well, I want to think about that for a minute. And I thought about this many times, and I'm sure most of you have too. You know, Christ came and lived in this flesh. And then when you get there and you're standing before Him, and you're saying, well, Lord, you really don't know how it is here. He said, yeah. I can see Christ saying, yeah, I do. I lived in the flesh and I died for you. We'll be without excuse. Won't be any excuses that it's going to make it okay. We're not going to be justified by our circumstances. Numbers chapter 11, verse 32 and 33 goes on. It says, but while the meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was aroused against the people, and the Lord struck the people with a very great plague and killed most of those people because of their sin, because it irritated Him so bad. It's hard to think about, but that's the way He felt about it. And they gathered those up, and He gave it to them, but it irritated Him so badly that He killed them. How about no one will know? Acts chapter 5, verses 1 through 5, we think about Ananias and Sapphira. We think about what happened here. And all of the people came to Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost, the day of feast, and they converted 3,000 souls. And they're all here, so they started getting money together to try to keep them there. And people were bringing their money and passing it out and distributing it to those that had need. They weren't prepared to stay that long. But if we read here, Ananias and Sapphira had a possession of land they wanted to sell and give it to the apostles to distribute. But what happened? But a certain man named Ananias and Sapphira, his wife, sold the possession, and he kept back part of the proceeds, his wife also being aware of it, and brought a certain part and laid it at the apostles' feet. But Peter said, Ananias, why Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and keep back part of the price of the land for yourself? While it remained, was it not your own? And after it was sold, was it not your own, not in your own control? Why have you conceived this thing in your heart? If you have not lied to men, but to God. And Ananias, hearing these words, fell down and breathed his last. And this always bothered me about this, because this is a New Testament church happening here, that he died because of money. And he thought nobody would know. You know, and I thought about that too. It was his land. It was his money. You know, he could have told Peter, well, I want to keep part of this, but here it is. But he lied about it. And because he was disobedient, because he lied, he paid the penalty. And he lost his life over it. You know, when we think about our sin and we think about the things we do, and we talked about that last night, that we can hide it from one another. We can be the sorriest person when we're away from this church building, or when I go back to Georgia, or when whatever you do. We can't hide it from God, because God sees everything we do. Sapphira, she ended up in the same situation. Acts chapter 5, 7 through 10 says, now it was about 3 hours later when his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. And Peter answered her, tell me whether you sold the land for so much. She said, yes, for so much. And Peter said to her, how is it that you have agreed together to test the Spirit of the Lord? Look, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out. And then immediately she fell down at his feet and breathed her last. Paid that same penalty. See, God knows. God knows what we do. You know, it's funny, when I was a kid, you know, we talked about things like this, and everybody, when you were in bed and you were sitting in there, you were thinking, well, I'm all alone. God's here watching me, watching what I'm doing. You know, be doing something that you wasn't supposed to do out away from your family, you know, but God knows what I'm doing. I hope my girls think that. I hope they really think about those things, that God's always watching us. We ain't going to hide it. We can hide it from our parents. We can hide the things that we do from our friends. But God is watching us, brothers and sisters, all the time. And it's a sobering thought in that sense if we really apply it. God knows. God knows what we're doing. How about for personal gain? A lot of times we do things for personal gain. You know, in business, people do a lot of things that are wrong for personal gain. Now, I run a business, and one of the guys I work with, he says, well, you got to lie in business. If you don't lie in business, you can't make it. I said, well, no, I don't think we got to. So we tell them the truth. They may not like it. We better tell them the truth. He said, no, you'll never make it. People think about it in that way. When we think about personal gain, the first person that comes to mind is Judas. Because Judas was covetous. He always wanted to covet. He held the money purse. He couldn't stand it. He loved money. Matthew 26, 14 and 15. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what are you willing to give me if I deliver him to you? And they counted out 30 pieces of silver. Then he betrayed Christ over money. And then he went out and hung himself afterward. You know, he paid that penalty. But we think about that, we think about gaining things the wrong way. You know, we think about our sin and it being a personal gain. It's not. We got to be careful with that. Luke chapter 12, verse 15, and he said to them, take heed and beware of covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses. We have to be careful how we obtain the things we have. It's got to be in the right manner. You know, there's plenty of people that are doing that in the wrong way. You know, we were talking about people today and the things where we were eating, we were laying out a tip on the table. And I've seen this several times. I don't know if y'all have seen this before, but I've seen people lay their tip on the table and somebody will come by and grab that tip up on the way out and get it from another table. And you go, well, that's pretty harsh. Take some person's work that they worked for, that tip, that money, take their money and walk out with it. It's a shame. People do that. Personal gain. They think they're getting that money, but they're really losing in a sense. How about it's easy? You know, we think about how easy it is to sin. Easy for us to do those things. It's really easy. We look at Galatians 5, 19 through 21. It says, now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, dissensions, heresies, envy, murders, drunkenness, revelries, and the like, of which I tell you beforehand, just as I told you in time past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. You know, the works of the flesh are easy to do. Committing adultery is easy to do. People do it all the time. Committing fornication, easy things to do. All of these things are easy. But we can't inherit the kingdom of heaven if we do those things. If we practice those things. We have to be careful how we do, how we live our lives as a Christian. That we realize that God doesn't accept it. God's not going to take an excuse of any type. So are we making excuses for breaking the rules this evening? Do we use these excuses? Someone else's fault, justified by circumstance, personal gain, because it's easy? I hope we don't. I hope when we look at our sin, you know, we all deal and fight with sin. Don't make excuses for it. You know, we have to battle sin. We've got to try to keep it out of our lives. But it's something we're faced with. Each and every one battles something different. You know, we talked about homosexuality. That sin will never bother me. But someone somewhere else has that problem and they battle that sin. Your sin may be different than mine, Brother Ralph. Brother Lindell, yours is going to be different. You're going to fight these. But we need to make sure that we always look at it as we can't make an excuse for it. Fight that fight. Keep the sin out of your life. Because it's going to always be there. Satan is such a great worker, you know. He's always looking for an angle. And when we feel like we got one thing whipped, he's right back after us again with some other type of sin that he's trying to get you to commit. So fight that good fight of faith. Live in the Spirit. Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 20 through 25 says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such as there is no law. And those who are Christ have crucified the flesh and its passions and desires. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. We have to replace those things of sin with things that are good. We got to live in the Spirit. You know, it's hard to do. It's a fight. I agree. It's just so hard to replace all those things. Because I like to get angry. One of those is up there. And I've been working on that a lot. Rhonda and I first met while I was a hothead. When run a business, people do me wrong, I was on yell, scream, I was hot. But now I've learned to control that. So now it's something else that's attacking me, that he fights. But I try to live in the Spirit, and I try to remember that. Try to stay focused on that prize. And put aside all those earthly passions and desires. It's always going to be there, and we're always going to fight it. But fight the good fight of faith. Be ready. Luke chapter 21, verses 34 through 36. So take heed to yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and the cares of this life. And the day will come on you unexpectedly, for it will come as a snare on those who dwell on the face of the whole earth. Watch therefore and pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that will come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. That we're going to watch, we're going to pray, we're going to always try to focus on the prize. That's the key, brothers and sisters. To stay away from those earthly desires and those passions. This evening, I hope that the things that we discuss will help you in some way. This lesson is just really meant for us to look at our lives and try to see our faults and try to improve on them. I hope the things that we talked about this evening were helpful for you in some way. If there's one here that's never obeyed the gospel, what is your life? It's even a vapor that appears for a little time and vanishes away. You know, when I got to be 40 years old, I said, man, I'm half dead. If I live to 80, I'll be half dead. I'm 49 now. I'm really way over half dead now. So you start thinking about how quick it was. And you know, when I was a kid, I remember thinking, it's going to take me forever to get out of this high school or out of school and get to the 12th grade. You know, I was in elementary school. It seemed like that time drug on. And I don't know, kids, if y'all do this, but when I sat in the schoolroom, we were talking about clocks. I would sit down in that desk and I'd look up, and that second hand looked like it was moving like that. I thought, man, I've got to go. I want to get out of here. It's all I could think about. But you know, after I graduated from high school, and I'm sure all of these people here that are out of high school tell you, next thing you know, Mama said, you're old. You know? And now I go, what? It's just a vapor. Our time just flies by, doesn't it? You know, it'd be no time and I'll be gone. If God grants me to live here till I'm 80. Or till maybe I'm 100. I doubt that, but it's just really quick, isn't it? And you look back, and I can still remember when I was a little kid, you know, a little kid playing out in the ditches and the creeks, and Ralph and I were talking about when I was a little kid, I used to go up underneath the culvert pipes in our subdivision and beat around with a stick and run these water moccasins out and beat them and kill them. I thought that was great until one of them tried to bite me, and then I quit doing it. But I still remember that vividly. But I was probably in the 5th grade when I was doing those things. Do you think about that often, how quick your life is gone, how fast it goes past? You know, if you never obeyed the gospel, your life could be over today. Could be over tomorrow. Who knows? You may live here for another 100 years. You don't know. But I can tell you, one day closer to meeting the Lord. If you've never obeyed the gospel, you've got to hear the word, believe Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and repent of whatever sins in your life, confess His name before men. And you've got to be baptized for a reason, for the remission of sins, to wash away your sins. If you've never done that, today's the day to do it. And if you're not living faithfully, or if you're letting things, or if you're making excuses for your sin, today's the day to get that rectified. Come forward. Have a seat on the front pew. We'll be glad to pray for you. If there's one here that needs to be baptized, come forward. We'll get that taken care of. If there's anyone in either column, won't you come as we stand and as we sing?